Hello everyone, I'm Vanish Signal. Before we get into tonight's footage, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Story 1. The Hollow House. The house on Marrow Street had been marked for demolition not once, but twice. Both times, the permits mysteriously vanished from city records. Not misplaced, not stuck in a drawer. Gone. Like they'd been deliberately erased. The last contractor assigned to the site dropped the job without warning. He left all his gear behind, power tools, harnesses, even his truck keys, and stopped answering calls. When his supervisor visited the property to retrieve the equipment, he found the man's hard hat on the porch, sitting perfectly upright, like it had been placed there with intent. Our department got the call from City Code Enforcement after a neighbor reported seeing lights in the windows. They framed it as a routine inspection. Check for squatters. Make sure nobody had forced their way inside again. Danvers volunteered. I tagged along because I didn't trust the place to stay quiet. The street was already mostly reclaimed by weeds and kudzu, a forgotten dead end flanked by rusted fences and cracked pavement. Only one building remained upright. 2 stories, long and narrow. Its roof sagged in the middle like a broken spine. Every window was uncovered, no boards, no bars. Just empty rectangles of black glass, as if they were waiting for us. Inside, the air was bone dry, not dusty. The surfaces were too clean for a house that hadn't seen a tenant in decades. It was stale. Wrong. The kind of stillness you feel before a thunderclap. The kind of quiet that follows a scream. Danvers stepped across the foyer and paused. A fallen beam blocked the path ahead. The floor beneath it had turned to mulch, eaten through by time and rot. But the beam itself was flawless. Not even a scratch. Danvers nudged it with his boot. It didn't creak or splinter. "Looks like it just fell," he said under his breath. But there was no dust on the floor, no crash debris, no sign it had fallen at all. Just the beam, resting calmly across the rot, like it had always belonged there. As we moved deeper into the structure, the geometry stopped making sense. Angles were off by just enough to notice. Hallways curved where they should have ended. The second-floor staircase turned tighter than it had on the blueprint. Upstairs, we found a room that shouldn't have existed, a square space marked clearly on the layout, but with no door, no window, no visible way in or out. Just a perfect cube of walls and wallpaper that shimmered slightly under flashlight. The pattern repeated across every surface. Stylized eyes. Dozens of them, all open, all watching. That's when we felt it. Not heard, felt. A deep vibration, humming through the floorboards and into our bones. Like something massive had shifted in the foundation, but the walls didn't move. No creaks, no sway, just pressure, heavy and constant. Danvers stopped walking. He leaned in, ears straining. "Do you hear it breathing?" he asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but my radio crackled to life. No call sign, no voice. Just static at first. Then, barely audible through the interference, a whisper. "You're already inside." Danvers didn't speak again for a full minute. He just stood there, one hand lightly touching the wall, head tilted like he was listening to a sound nobody else could hear. I watched his fingers twitch slightly against the wallpaper. Those stylized eyes staring back at him, unmoving, expressionless. Then, like someone had flipped a switch, he snapped out of it, blinked twice, turned to me with a sharp breath and said, "We shouldn't be here." I agreed, but turning back meant retracing our steps. And the house wasn't built to be backtracked. The hallway behind us had shifted, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The layout was wrong. The shadows too deep, too fluid. The doors no longer matched what we'd passed. A room we'd stepped through minutes earlier now had a second doorway, leading somewhere we hadn't been. Danvers muttered something about trying the stairs. I followed, flashlight beam trembling slightly as the light bounced off walls that seemed to resist it. The staircase looked longer this time. Not steeper, longer, like the climb had been stretched. We counted steps aloud as we ascended. 17, 18, 19, still climbing. The radio on my belt hissed again. This time, a voice did come through. But it wasn't a voice I recognized. Male, calm, familiar cadence, but not from any of our crew. "You'll want to stop counting now," it said. "You'll only confuse him." Danvers froze. His foot hovered mid-step. He turned to me and whispered, "Who said that?" I raised the radio, tried to respond. Before I could key the mic, a high-pitched whine pierced the air, sharp and sudden, like feedback from a blown speaker. Danvers dropped to one knee, clutching his head. The lights in the hallway above us flickered, even though we hadn't restored power. We rushed the last few steps and burst into what should have been the upper landing. But instead of a hallway, we found a vast, open room. High ceiling, peeling a wallpaper curling like dead skin. And in the center, a lone wooden chair facing away from us, angled slightly toward the far wall. No windows, just that chair. Danvers approached it cautiously, stepping around the perimeter like he expected it to move. I stayed near the doorway, one hand on the radio, the other on my sidearm. He reached out, touched the chair's back. It spun, just a quarter turn. Slow, intentional. No wind, no movement in the air. But the chair moved all the same, and when it did, something clattered to the floor beside it. A tape recorder, old, dusty. It clicked once, then began to play. The voice was Danvers. Quiet, frightened. "I've seen it," the recording said. "It doesn't use the doors." Then silence. The tape kept spinning, but no more sound came out, and the air began to vibrate again. The footage from the hallway cam wasn't like the others. Something about it felt aware. The timestamp read 2:41 a.m., but the recording jumped and spasmed like it had been fed through a broken machine. Frames stitched together in a pattern that defied the layout of the house. 1 second, the corridor stood empty and dim. The next, it looked warped, bent at odd angles like light passing through liquid. Then, thick fog rolled in, low to the ground, swirling unnaturally fast for such a confined space. Then the figure appeared, just for 2 frames. It stood at the end of the hallway. The first time we paused the footage, the figure was still, its back turned, facing the wall. The second time we replayed it, the figure had turned halfway, its outline sharper, more deliberate. The third time, it was directly in front of the lens. No transition, no motion, just there, face to the glass, eyes locked on the camera, wide open, staring, mouth closed, skin an unnatural, waxy pale, frozen like a mannequin, but alive enough to make us recoil. None of us had seen this happen in real time. The live feeds had been clear, uneventful. But this was retroactive. The footage had changed, somehow, like it was responding to being watched. Micah, the youngest tech in the booth, went pale. Because the face on the screen, the figure staring back, it wasn't just anyone. It was him. Same jawline, same scar over the right brow, same faint freckle near the cheek. Identical. Not a cousin, not a doppelganger, a one-to-one match. The room felt quiet. Micah hadn't entered the house once. He'd stayed in the van, running cable checks and feed calibration. Yet the figure in the hallway wore his face like a mask that fit too well. He backed away from the monitor, shaking. He muttered something about how he felt wrong all day, like something had stuck to him after the first test run. We tried to laugh it off. Tension, maybe. But then we checked the stairwell cam. This footage began normally. Nothing strange at first. A few seconds of visual static, then a slow pan that made us freeze. The camera had moved on its own. These rigs weren't pan tilt setups. They were fixed positions, wired into the wall. But here, the camera shifted downward, adjusting slowly until it pointed directly at the basement stairs. We heard it next. Barely audible. Footsteps, uneven, barefoot. One slow, deliberate step at a time, climbing from below. And the audio wasn't the only thing reacting. The footage trembled, the lens jittered, not from mechanical error, but from something else. Like the house was trembling with it, with the rhythm of the steps. Then they stopped, and something reached up. Only a hand was visible at first, curling around the banister, pale, gray-dusted, fingers too long, the nails chipped, blackened. It flexed once, then again, testing the surface. We scrubbed forward, hoping to catch a clearer glimpse. At exactly 2:46 a.m., the signal cut. No power disruption, no circuit blow. The lens just went dark, not dim, not low light, pure black, like the camera had folded in on itself. A few frames before the blackout, we caught something in the corner, a glint. Twin reflections, faint, floating just above the stair. Eyes, watching, waiting. We haven't touched the rest of the archive yet. Because the external camera, the one facing the street, caught something even worse. At 2:48 a.m., the front door opened. No wind, no trigger. Just a slow, steady swing inward, as if someone unseen had invited the night in. Nobody exited the house. No shapes, no figures. But the door didn't close. It stayed wide open. Still is. The second floor wasn't on any of the blueprints. There were no stairs, no ladder, no crawl space or access hatch marked anywhere. We'd studied the layout for days before entering, and nothing suggested there was more above the ground level. But after we found the mirror in the hallway pulsing like a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic with a strange luminescence beneath the glass, we noticed something else. A door. It hadn't been there before. A narrow wooden frame tucked behind the coat rack in the foyer, like it had been hiding in plain sight. The brass handle was tarnished, old, worn smooth by use. The paint around the frame was peeled and curling, like this door had been opened and closed more times than any visible entrance in the house. But we had walked past that exact spot a dozen times earlier. It simply wasn't there before. The moment my hand touched the handle, it turned easily. Not locked, not jammed, just waiting. And when it opened, it didn't creak like the other. It sighed. The staircase behind it descended first. A short dip, then rose up steeply into the dark, angling into a part of the house that shouldn't have existed. It climbed slowly. Each step moaned, not like aged wood under weight, but like the house itself was exhaling, whispering, reacting. Halfway up, the air changed. It became heavy like syrup. The dust didn't swirl when we moved. It just hovered, frozen. The moment our heads reached above the final stair, the temperature plummeted. Cold like freezer air. Cold like breath that crystallized in the lungs. The hallway above was tighter than below. Wood-paneled walls pressed in close, and the ceiling dipped low enough that I had to duck slightly. Doors lined both sides, but they were all wrong. Each had a number burned into it, not painted. The sequence made no sense. Room 3, Room 9, Room 17. There were too few doors for the numbering, and too many for the space. Something about the geometry didn't add up. The floor creaked with every step, but not underfoot. Behind us, always behind us. A beat delayed, like we were being followed, one step behind. We opened room 3. The door resisted, then gave way with a reluctant click. Inside, a sparse bedroom. Twin bed, crisp sheets, lamp glowing faintly on the nightstand. The air was warmer, stale. A journal lay open on the bed, pages blank, until I touched it. Then, slowly, letters began to form. Ink bleeding up through the paper like veins appearing in skin. "I'm still here," it wrote. I left through the wrong reflection. We closed the book, said nothing, backed out. Room 9 was dimmer. A child's bedroom. Peeling wallpaper, the color of moldy cotton candy. Toys scattered in a perfect circle, all facing inward. One toy, a rabbit with 2 long ears, turned its head as we entered. Just slightly. Its plastic eyes tracked us, lips twitching like it was about to speak. A whisper. Faint. My name. We left quickly. Room 17 had no floor, just a mirror, stretched from wall to wall, a perfect sheet of glass so still it looked solid. I knelt, looked down. It didn't reflect us. It reflected the same hallway, but all the doors were open. Inside each one, something shifted. Shadows, movement, figures that darted from view but never fully vanished. One of them stopped. It was me, not a reflection, not my opposite. Me, standing still, looking back, smiling. We slammed the door. The staircase was gone. In its place, another hallway. Longer, narrower, doors unnumbered, breathing. The walls inhaled and exhaled slowly, rhythmically, like lungs in sleep. We were inside something, a shell shaped like a house, but never meant to be one. A skin worn over something older, hungrier. Then the whisper returned. This time, close. Too close. Right at the base of my neck. Wrong reflection. By the time they called in the specialist unit, the property had been cordoned off for nearly 12 hours. No one had gone in since Keller. No one had come out. The front windows now showed only darkness, thick and absolute, as if they'd been painted black from inside. The porch light blinked in slow, erratic pulses, like a dying heartbeat. 4 officers had been hospitalized from brief exposure to the interior. Each emerged altered, speechless, pupils dilated. One tried to dig out their own eyes in the ambulance. Another refused to speak to anyone except the mirror in the hospital room, whispering again and again. I didn't know it was a door. The task force arrived just before dawn. Full hazmat suits, thermal drones, fiber optic cameras. A tech unit snaked a miniature cam through the mailbox slot and got 7 frames before the entire system shorted out. All 7 images showed the same angle of the foyer. Empty, except for Keller's body sitting upright in the far corner, knees bent, hands folded neatly in his lap. His head was tilted toward the wall, and his mouth hung open, mid-inhale. Frozen. In the 5th frame, something in the mirror above the table. Half seen, blurred, like motion caught mid-frame, was reaching toward his shoulder. They performed a full perimeter sweep and discovered something stranger. None of the windows reflected the surrounding neighborhood. Each pane showed a different location entirely. One displayed a dark, windowless hallway that stretched into nothing. Another showed a flickering hospital corridor with movement just out of view. One showed snow falling in a forest that no one could identify. When a patrol officer leaned too close to inspect the glass, his reflection didn't follow. It stood still, then blinked. That afternoon, under absolute blackout conditions, a recon team was sent in. Full-body thermal suits, dual live-feed GPS, biometric tracking. The house interior no longer matched the city blueprints. Hallways extended beyond the property limits. Staircases looped impossibly into themselves. Mirrors appeared on walls that hadn't existed before. The living room had transformed into a chapel-like space. 12 folding chairs arranged before a pulpit. Atop the pulpit sat an old CRT television, resting on a plastic milk crate. Its screen buzzed, faintly illuminated, but showed no channel. One of the team stepped forward and reported over comms. "It's playing footage of me." I'm speaking, but I don't remember saying any of this. That was the last clear transmission. At 4:13 p.m. sharp, all signals flatlined. No movement, no bio readings. The house's front door creaked shut on its own. Quiet, deliberate. Then it locked from the inside. All attempts to contact the team failed. By nightfall, residents on the block began reporting a deep, humming noise pulsing through their homes. The kind of vibration that bypasses the ears and lands straight in the chest. Low frequency, invasive. Security was increased. External cameras were installed across every angle of the property. Still, footage showed lights turning on in the upstairs bedrooms at exactly 2:13 a.m. each night. Motion sensors triggered. Figures could be seen moving through the windows, but never clearly. Occasionally, a face appeared in the attic. More than once, it looked like one of the missing team members. But none of them had returned. 7 days later, without warning, all external surveillance systems failed simultaneously. The final captured feed showed a figure behind the living room window, pale, still, waving gently at the camera. Facial recognition flagged no matches, and then the tape ended. The house remains. Its windows are dark. Its doors stay closed. But it's not waiting. It's watching. End of story 1. Story 2. The cellar door. When the Lancaster house finally hit the market, it had been vacant for more than 16 years. Not a boarded-up shell or storm-wrecked ruin. Just an ordinary 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch and peeling paint. But locals avoided it like it carried a sickness. People didn't talk about it unless they had to. Even the town's urban legends usually skipped over it, as if even ghost stories had better places to be. Teenagers dared each other to step onto the front porch, maybe press their palms to the dusty front windows, or throw a rock at the attic dormer. But no one ever made it farther. Not even once. No broken locks, no signs of squatters, no graffiti. The mailbox was fused shut with rust. Vines had overtaken the front fence. The grass was shoulder high in places, completely obscuring what used to be a brick path. And behind the house, just past the sagging shed, sat the cellar door. Thick wood, blackened with age, sealed with 2 lengths of chain and a bolt the size of my forearm. It looked less like a door and more like a warning. I was sent there on assignment for a university research project. My focus: modern folklore and how isolated communities shape their myths. The Lancaster house was infamous enough to make a compelling case study. With permission from the new owners, a faceless property firm based several counties away, I gained legal access. Their only stipulation: don't break anything. Document what you want, the rep told me over the phone. Just leave it how you found it. The electricity was disconnected. Water hadn't run since 2007. They'd recently changed the locks, though, and assured me the place hadn't been entered since the sale closed. You'll be the first one inside since at least 2008, the guy added casually, as if that were reassuring. Stepping into the Lancaster house felt like entering a sealed container. The air was thick, not just dusty, but pressurized, like the entire structure had been waiting. I remember that specific thought. Waiting. Every step I took felt magnified. Every floorboard creaked with just enough resistance to sound intentional. Sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds in streaks, catching floating particles in slow motion. I filmed everything: panoramas of the rooms, angled shots of corners and doorways, whispered commentary into a handheld mic. The furniture was long gone, but impressions remained. Dustless rectangles on the floors, faint outlines where wallpaper had been shielded by picture frames. The upstairs bathroom mirror was shattered, but the glass was still inside the sink, as if nobody had ever bothered to clean it. Something about the whole place felt carefully paused, not abandoned. Like someone had walked away mid-step and just never came back. By dusk, I circled around back. The cellar door was exactly where I expected it. Low to the ground, flush with the slope of the lawn, still wrapped in its rusted chains and bolted shut. But something was off. Something new. A small, modern security camera sat just opposite it, mounted to a compact tripod, wired to a portable power cell that was half buried in the weeds. This wasn't from the property firm. It had no visible brand or serial. No company markings, just a single glowing red light, steady and unblinking. Recording. Live. I approached cautiously, filming as I moved. The closer I got, the stranger it looked. There was no screen, no buttons, no lens housing. Just a flat black surface, smooth and seamless, with one single sticker on the rear casing, worn and scratched, but readable. In blocky, faded type, it read, "Observer." That's when I heard it. A click. Software subtle. From beneath the cellar door, it wasn't a thud or bang, just the sound of pressure shifting, of something mechanical releasing. Like a latch sliding open, like something inside had just unlocked. I froze, slowly backed away. My breath caught. The camera didn't follow me, but its red light blinked once, then again. Then it shut off entirely, and the cellar door creaked open exactly 1 inch. I didn't approach. I didn't try to close it. I left everything, my gear bag, my clipboard, even my mic, and got in my car. Parked across the street, lights off, eyes on the house. All night, I waited. The cellar door never moved again. The chains hung loose but still in place. The bolt unmoved. But just before sunrise, the camera powered back on. It rotated slowly and pointed directly at me. By the time I returned to the house the next evening, the fog had thickened into a blanket, pressing in from all sides like a living thing. The woods were silent, unnaturally so, as if even the wind had learned not to speak around this place. Every step up the path felt heavier, each crunch of dead leaves underfoot louder than it should have been. The leaves had fallen early, too early for the season, and they clung to my boots like they didn't want me to go any further. I hadn't planned to return so soon, but something about the footage refused to let me go. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. That single frame looped endlessly in my mind. The boy standing in the cellar doorway, his eyes meeting the lens. It wasn't fear I saw there. It was recognition. Inside, the house was just as I'd left it. Air thick with dust, hanging like smoke in the weak glow of my flashlight. The walls sweated with decay, the smell of damp rot almost suffocating. My breath echoed too loud in the stillness. I walked straight to the main hall, pulling out the small toolkit I'd packed before I could second-guess myself. The cellar door stood where it always had, silent, swollen with time and moisture, warped like it had been bracing against something from the other side. I pried it open with a crowbar, the hinges crying out in protest, wood splitting in slow, deliberate groans that sounded more like warning than wear. Cold air rushed out from below, colder than before. And with it came a scent, metallic and thick, blood or something close to it. The beam from my flashlight jittered once, then steadied. I gripped it tighter. The stairs leading down were narrow, ancient stone steps, slick with grime. I took them one at a time, my boots slipping just enough to remind me I was alone. At the bottom was a wide room with a low ceiling that seemed to press down on me the longer I stood there. The stone walls were weeping condensation. Shelves, long since collapsed into heaps of rotted wood, littered the corners. And at the center, one patch of floor completely clean, like something had stood there for a long, long time. I started filming immediately. The red record light blinked into life as I swept the camera across the room. For a few seconds, the feed was clean, crisp. But then the background hiss began, low at first, then rising in pitch. A crackling came next, not electrical, but biological. The kind of sound you hear in your joints on a cold morning, or bones resetting themselves. Then the glitch hit. Just a flicker, a hiccup, but enough. In a single frame, something towered behind me. Too tall, skin stretched wrong, no features, just a mouth that split the face open, too wide, too empty, grinning with something that wasn't joy. I spun, heart hammering. Nothing. Empty shelves. Still air. But the clean patch of floor was gone, covered in dust again, like whatever had stood there had moved or followed. I didn't stay. I backed up the steps, filming the entire time. My hand trembled, making the feed twitch. At the fifth step from the top, the footage warped. Static blurred the screen in jagged pulses before it cleared. And for a heartbeat, I saw something impossible. The staircase kept going, downward, infinitely. I blinked, gone. A trick of the light, maybe? Or a peek through something I wasn't supposed to see. I left the cellar door open. That night, I reviewed the footage frame by frame. Slow, careful, every flicker, every noise. And there, embedded in the audio just under the hiss, I found it. A voice, faint, barely more than a vibration. But when isolated and slowed, it resolved. 3 words, crooked and deliberate. Close the door. I didn't sleep that night either. And now, even with the footage paused, I swear I can still hear the voice. Not from the recording, from the cellar, waiting. They went down in pairs. Eli and Marissa were the first. Marissa clutched her flashlight like it was a weapon, the white-knuckled grip betraying how hard she was trying not to shake. Eli carried a rusted wrench he'd yanked from the boiler room, a heavy, jagged thing with a red-stained handle. The others waited at the top of the stairs, crowding around the old hatch like it might slam shut on its own. They listened for voices, for anything. But the only thing that came back was silence. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then 7. Jared leaned over the edge and called out, voice shaking more than he wanted to admit. No answer. Just the hiss of cold, wet air pushing up the stairs like breath. It smelled like earth and rust and something else. Sour and wrong. And finally, a voice. Eli's, but not right. Warped, echoing back like it had been swallowed and spit out. Come. See this. Just those 3 words. Nothing else. Jared and Bree were next. They exchanged one look, agreement without words, and started down. The others stayed. Someone had to. That had been the plan. 1 pair goes down, 2 stay. But as they descended, that rule started to feel like a trap disguised as strategy. Like something had made them think it up just to separate them. The descent felt off. Jared had gone down this way before. 13 steps, creaky wood, low ceiling. But now, the staircase stretched. It shouldn't have taken more than 10 seconds. It took a full minute. The steps went deeper than the foundation should allow. The dark above vanished. The air was thicker now, like walking into a cave where the oxygen didn't know it was supposed to be breathable. Bree grabbed his sleeve and pointed. A hallway. Stone walls. Old. Damp. carved into the foundation like it had been waiting to be rediscovered. It twisted to the left, where the old shelves used to be, but now stretched long and narrow. The floor was no longer concrete, it was dirt. Packed but uneven, as if many feet had walked it and none had returned. Eli stood near the edge of the hallway's bend, frozen, his face pale, eyes wide. He didn't blink. Marissa sat beside him, knees hugged tight, rocking slightly. Her flashlight lay useless on the floor, pointing into the dark. "They're behind us," she whispered over and over. "They're already behind us." Jared scanned the tunnel. It looked empty. But the shadows moved. Not like they were being pushed by light, but like they were waiting, calculating, choosing their moments to exist. Something changed in the air, a shift, like the hallway exhaled. Jared stepped toward Eli cautiously. "They're not people," Eli said softly, voice nearly mechanical. That's when Bree screamed. Jared turned. The tunnel behind them had vanished. In its place was a different path, sloping in a new direction, one that hadn't been there before. At the far end of it, under a flickering bulb, stood something. A figure. Its limbs too long, head tilted, legs bent the wrong way, and no face. Just a stretch of skin where one should be. The shadows moved again, closer, tighter, purposeful. Bree ran. Jared didn't hesitate. He followed. But the hallway pulsed beneath them. The ground shifted. It wasn't floor anymore. It was soft, like walking on stretched leather. The walls rippled. Every step took them deeper, but not forward. Hallways branched in every direction, none familiar, none leading back. Behind them, Marissa's voice still carried, faint and calm. "They said we could leave whenever we wanted. We just had to stop pretending we were real." And then even her voice began to echo differently, like it belonged to something else entirely. By the time the locksmith arrived, the light had gone back to normal. The hum had ceased. No vibrations in the floorboards, just a dead, patient silence that pressed against the skin like damp cloth. Jordan met him at the front gate, nerves fraying, barely managing eye contact. He didn't know how to explain what they wanted without sounding insane. But the locksmith just nodded, as if this was normal. Maybe it was, for him. When shown the cellar door, he paused only briefly, then adjusted his tool bag and knelt beside the rusted iron lock. "Strange mechanism," he muttered. "Not standard. Looks like something out of the 1800s, custom maybe, or ceremonial." It took him 40 minutes to open it. The whole time, the air around the cellar door remained unusually cold, and the shadows in that corner of the house seemed to shift and twitch when no one was looking directly at them. When the lock finally gave, it didn't click. It sighed, soft and low, like a tired breath slipping out after years of being held. The door creaked open on its own, just a few inches, enough to show the first steps of a staircase that plunged down into thick, perfect black. Jordan switched on his flashlight and aimed it downward, but the beam failed to reach the bottom. It simply stopped, like the darkness was solid. The air that drifted up wasn't dusty or stale. It was cold, fresh, uncomfortably fresh, like it came from somewhere far deeper than a basement had any right to reach. Lex stood beside him, silent, eyes fixed on the descending void. The locksmith made some vague comment about old architecture, warned them not to go down too far, and left without ceremony. Just like that, Jordan and Lex were alone again. Jordan descended first, each step creaking beneath his boots. Lex followed close behind, one hand brushing the rough wall, flashlight held tight in the other. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Even their breath seemed to absorb into the stone. After maybe 12 steps, they found another obstruction. A rusted iron gate, already half open, its hinges fused with age. Beyond it, a circular room, just barely illuminated in the sweep of their lights. The walls were lined with uneven shelves carved straight into the stone. But instead of old wine or forgotten tools, they were filled with dozens, no, hundreds of objects, each wrapped tightly in stained burlap and bound with twine. Jordan picked one up. It was oddly heavy. Beneath the fabric was a porcelain doll, cracked and worn. Its eyes had been gouged out and replaced with small, polished stones, black and glassy like obsidian. Lex peeled back another bundle and found an old wedding photo. The man's face had been scratched away entirely, but the woman remained. Her expression was frozen in a moment of raw terror, as though she had just realized something horrible. In the center of the room stood a single table, thick-legged and ancient. Atop it, an open journal, its pages damp and warped by time. The ink had run in places, but one line had been circled again and again, the pressure of the pen carving through the paper and into the wood beneath. The cellar door was never meant to open. Before either of them could speak, a sharp sound cracked through the quiet. Something had fallen behind them. They turned in unison. The cellar door was closed. Where the lock had been was now a bloom of twisted metal, fused, knotted, seamless, as if the door had grown it back. Then came the sound. Breathing? It wasn't theirs. It came from the far corner of the room, deep, ragged, slow. Something moved just outside the reach of the flashlight beams. A shuffling, deliberate drag across the stone, and then the flashlights began to flicker. Once, twice. Then darkness swallowed them whole. They told me not to go back. After the emergency team extracted me from the basement, I spent 2 nights under medical observation. The official report said I collapsed due to a gas leak. Some ruptured pipe from decades ago, long ignored and finally given out. They explained away everything else as a hallucination brought on by oxygen deprivation. They ran all the tests, blood work, brain scans, tox screens. Every result came back clean. But no one would meet my eyes when they handed over the paperwork. No one said it out loud, but they were scared. Not of what happened to me, of what I might bring back. Because I wasn't hallucinating, and it sure as hell wasn't a gas leak. 3 days after the incident, the house was sealed off. Boards across the windows, the cellar door entombed in fresh concrete. No trespassing signs everywhere. But every night since, I kept dreaming. The same dream. The cellar. The shifting shadows behind cracked brick. The whispering voice that sounded exactly like mine, but hollow. Distant. Wrong. I'd jolt awake at exactly 2:13 a.m. every time, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. And always, I'd hear those same words in my head. You shouldn't have left. Last night, the dream changed. This time, I didn't wake up in bed. I woke up standing in the cellar itself, barefoot on the cold concrete, heart pounding. The air was wet with rot. The old mirror stood in the corner again, impossibly clean, untouched by dust or cobwebs. Waiting. And when I turned toward it, I didn't see my reflection form. It was already there, watching, waiting, smiling. It smiled first. I thought I was losing my mind. But the moment I opened my eyes for real, I knew what I had to do. I got in the car, and I drove back. The road twisted like it didn't want to let me go. But when I arrived, the house was exactly as I feared. The boards torn away, door hanging open, yellow caution tape fluttering like dead petals in the wind. The world outside was humid, thick with summer heat. But the moment I stepped inside, everything changed. The air turned sharp. metallic, frozen. The cellar door, the one they swore they'd sealed, was closed, but not locked. I opened it. The stairs creaked with every step, like they remembered my weight. The basement bulb flickered back to life. No switch, no power line, just glowing, as if waiting. And in the middle of that gray stone floor stood the mirror again, tall and perfect. But the glass was gone. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a surface, a dark, fluid sheet like liquid obsidian, still, deep. But as I stepped closer, it began to ripple. Not like water, more like skin under pressure. Something pulsed beneath the surface, a heartbeat. Then a crack split the center, silent, smooth, like it had done this before. And through that fracture, I saw movement, not just a reflection, not a copy. A version of me, alive, breathing, studying me with quiet interest. It stepped closer, matched my stance, my breathing, everything. Then it tilted its head, slightly, and said, "We only needed one of us to leave. Now you can stay." I tried to run, to scream, but my body locked, my lungs seized. I was frozen in place, eyes wide as my double stepped through the surface, out into the basement, into my world. It brushed past me like I was air, warm, smiling, confident. Its eyes glinted with something unfamiliar, not malice, not cruelty, just certainty. It climbed the stairs and disappeared, and then the mirror sealed shut. Now I'm here, alone, in this cold, flickering cellar. I don't know how much time has passed, hours, days. The light never changes. There's no sound beyond the slow hum of my breath. And every so often, the mirror pulses again, like something is stirring, preparing, waiting for its next chance. If you're hearing this, then maybe you found this tape. Maybe you're trying to understand what happened to me. Maybe you're wondering if I made it out. I didn't. The thing that left in my place, it's not coming back. End of story. Story 2. The cellar window. The first sign something was wrong came from the hallway. Not a sound exactly, but the way it absorbed sound. Like the air outside the bedroom door was heavier, thicker, almost gelatinous. Jenna paused mid-step, one socked foot just past the edge of her carpet, holding her breath. It was late. Too late for the creaks and whines of old pipes to mean anything harmless. And yet, she heard nothing. Not the hum of the fridge. Not the wind. Just the absolute absence of everything. The house had been empty for 6 years before she moved in. Just off Route 19. Classic foreclosure, bank-owned, gutted down to the studs in places, windows boarded, lawns strangled in vines. But the cellar had always stayed sealed, locked tight with a bolted hatch, heavy enough that even her contractor had shrugged it off. Even the listing agent didn't have the key. Probably some kind of water damage, she'd guessed. Cheaper to drywall it off than repair. Jenna believed her. At first. Until last week, when she found the window. She'd been weeding out back, wrestling with a curtain of overgrown hedges pressed hard against the cracked foundation. That's when she saw it. A grimy square of glass tucked low in the brickwork, half the size of a typical basement window, rimmed in rust and warped metal. It didn't match the blueprint. It wasn't even listed. And the worst part? It had been wiped clean. Not just clearer than the rest, immaculate. Spotless. Like someone inside had been watching. That night, she tried shining her flashlight through it. But the beam bounced back, scattered like it had hit mist just on the other side. She went inside, checked every room that lined up with that part of the house. Nothing. No door, no crawl space, just drywall, patched and painted smooth, blending into the rest of the renovated mess. That brings her back to tonight. That silence. She steps into the hallway, slowly. The floorboards beneath her don't creak. They never do. But something about their stillness tonight feels wrong. Like they're holding their breath too. Down the staircase, past the kitchen, beyond the utility closet, she sees it. The cellar hatch. And it's open. Not fully. Just a sliver. Like someone started to lift it, then paused. Waiting. She hadn't even known it could open. Her hands tighten into fists. Her throat is dry. She walks down, each step slower than the last. Her phone's in her pocket. No flashlight this time. Just the hallway light behind her, casting her shadow forward like a stretched, silent witness. The hatch is old. Iron latch, thick wooden frame, hinges that haven't moved in decades. It's pushed upward by half an inch, enough to see that the dark beneath isn't pitch black anymore. It's illuminated by something faint, a glow, flickering, shifting like candlelight. And then she hears it. 3 knocks from the other side. Slow, measured, waiting. She backs up, heart hammering, fists clenched tight at her sides. But the hatch doesn't move again. Not until 3:13 a.m., when her phone vibrates in her pocket. She jumps, pulls it out with trembling fingers. One message. No number. No contact. Thank you for opening the window. She never touched it. But now, something is inside, and it knows she's awake. The following morning, I returned to the house just after sunrise. I told myself it was for closure, maybe to take a few last photos before the owners showed up, or maybe just to prove to myself that it really was nothing, that the night had simply gotten under my skin. But when I pulled up to the curb, my stomach sank. The cellar window was open, not broken, not damaged, just slid open like someone inside had done it. There was no lock mechanism, just a rusted latch hanging loose. I stared at it from the sidewalk for a full minute before stepping closer. The window wasn't large, a tight rectangular cutout just above ground level. Enough space for air circulation, maybe to pass a small box through, but not meant for entry or exit. Yet something had opened it. Something had shifted it with care. I walked the perimeter of the house again, slower this time. The grass was flattened near the window. A trail of disturbed dirt angled away from the opening toward the rear of the property. I followed it. 20 feet back, it simply stopped, like whoever or whatever had come out had vanished into thin air. No other prints, no drag marks, just that one broken path. The silence surrounding me was uncanny, like the whole street was holding its breath. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. I crossed the threshold and instantly felt the weight of the air. Heavier, wetter, like a basement after a flood. But there hadn't been any rain. Dust motes hung thick in the beams of sunlight from the front windows. I moved room to room with my camera, but the click of the shutters sounded too loud. The house felt like it was listening, like every sound I made was being logged and filed somewhere just out of reach. The cellar door was shut. I hadn't touched it the day before, hadn't even planned to, but now it felt like the only place that mattered. I pressed my hand to the wood. It was cold. Not the kind of cold from poor insulation, but the sort that seeps out of stone. I turned the knob. It resisted at first, then gave way with a reluctant creak. The stairs descended into a darkness too thick for the morning light. I clicked on my flashlight and took a single step down. The floor groaned behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. I took another step. The groan again, this time above me. Not floorboards, not natural. It sounded like something deliberately shifting its weight to match mine. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered. Then, ahead of me, something moved. A shape. Small. Quick. It darted out of sight just as my light steadied. I froze, staring into the black. The walls were lined with old shelves, some still holding jars or rusted tools. But at the far end of the cellar was a table. And on that table was a pile of clothing. Children's clothing, folded neatly, too neatly, stacked in a way that suggested routine, ritual even. A shiver ran down my spine. I stepped closer, flashlight trained on the table. The clothes weren't dirty. They weren't aged like the rest of the room. They looked recently washed. Rested on top was a single child's shoe. Clean, polished, laced, and beneath it, a photo. It was of a young girl, 6, maybe 7. Smiling, posed next to a different house, one I didn't recognize. On the back, in faded pen, Lucy, 1998. Then, from the shadows behind the shelves, came a sound, not footsteps, breathing. Shallow, measured, close, rhythmic in a way that felt calculated. I backed up. My flashlight trembled in my grip. The beam caught a glint, eyes. Low to the ground, watching, waiting. Not animal, not quite human. Too steady, too aware. Then they blinked. I ran. Up the stairs, through the door, into the daylight. I didn't stop until I reached the car, fumbling with my keys as I looked back at the house. The cellar window was shut again. I never heard it close. But I felt it. That soft whisper of movement, like the air adjusting to something new. Something returning to stillness after being disturbed. And in that silence, I realized whatever had opened the window hadn't escaped. It had gone back in. We returned to the house at 2:08 a.m., exactly 24 hours after the last incident. The cellar window was still unbroken, its glass clean as a mirror. But the soil around it was different now. The ground was disturbed, light indentations, barefoot, child-sized. But the spacing was off. Too far apart for a normal stride, too deep for someone that small. They looped around the side of the foundation and vanished beneath a curtain of dried ivy that hung stiff from the porch beams like brittle fingers. Whatever left them hadn't been walking. The homeowner stood frozen in the driveway. She wouldn't go near the cellar door. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup, which had long since gone cold. She told us the house hadn't been still since we last left. Strange things. Quiet taps in the walls late at night, light bulbs that flickered exactly twice before going dark. A foul smell in the upstairs hallway like spoiled milk, even though the refrigerator had been dead for over a decade. She hadn't slept. She was sure the house was remembering something. We brought 3 cameras this time. One placed in the cellar, aimed directly at the window. Another just outside, positioned to look in. The third, a thermal unit, mounted opposite the stairwell wall, sweeping the entire lower half of the room. Everything was calibrated. Batteries were fresh. We double-checked the sink. For the first hour, everything held. Silence. No motion. Not even the usual electrical hum from the wall outlets. But at exactly 3:17 a.m., the cellar feed jittered, briefly. It didn't stutter on the lens, but on the far wall. A quick flicker, low and fast, as if something was crawling just beyond the edge of the camera's reach. The image glitched twice, froze for a single frame, then resumed. The shadow was gone, except now the inside of the window was fogged. We checked the outside cam. No figure, no movement. But on playback, exactly 6 frames, something else showed up. A face. Not pressed to the glass, but near it. Suspended. The mouth slightly parted, eyes half-lidded, drifting like someone trying to remember a name. The face didn't look at the camera, didn't react. It just hovered there. Then it blinked, and the condensation disappeared. Clean, like someone had wiped it from the inside. We rewound the footage again and again. Same 6 frames, same eerie stillness. It didn't appear startled. It didn't acknowledge us. It looked like it had always been there, as if caught mid-thought. One of the techs said it reminded him of an old photograph, like an image trapped in a failing memory, flickering just long enough to be seen but never interacted with. We pulled all the footage for extraction, but then the thermal cam went haywire. The numbers didn't rise, they dropped. The air temperature in the lower third of the cellar plummeted 12 degrees in less than 10 seconds. One corner, far left and unremarkable on visual scan, dipped below freezing. We went down to check it physically. No draft, no leak, no vent. But on the wall, a light layer of frost had formed. Not in patches, in lines, curved strokes, intersections. Someone, or something, had drawn in the ice. It wasn't random. It looked like symbols, like a message halfway written, waiting to be understood. When we ran the earlier footage through enhancement again, one final detail stood out. The face in the window. It wasn't inside. It was reflected in the glass, behind the camera, in the exact spot no one had been standing. And the angle confirmed one more thing. Whoever it was, they had been looking past us the entire time. They brought in an independent contractor to reseal the basement. No one from the original crew would return, not after what they claimed to hear the last time, the knocking, the humming, the single line of whispered static that formed their names in perfect, breathless rhythm. One man even said the basement made him dream about drowning, awake, fully aware, but unable to move. So now, a man named Rafferty stood in the cold morning light, clipboard in one hand, pry bar in the other. He wasn't local, didn't know the stories, didn't want to. Just a job, just a wall. The homeowner, Mrs. Keller, met him at the door but didn't step past the threshold. "Just seal it. Don't ask questions," she said, her voice raw from lack of sleep, eyes tired, hair disheveled in clumps. She held a photo in her hand, not facing him. He only caught a glimpse, a child's drawing maybe. Crayons, uneven lines, a face in the cellar window with too many teeth. Or maybe it was just smudged. Rafferty descended alone. Each step creaked too loud. The air was dry this time, still somehow heavier, pressed down on his chest like the weight of water in a pool. The walls bled faint moisture like sweat, cold and slow. He got to work quickly, removing the last of the boards, scraping down the mortar joints, ignoring the strange bend in the stone that didn't match the rest of the foundation. The window was small, barely 6 inches tall and a foot wide, too narrow for a person to crawl through. But he swore, just as he looked up to assess the frame, he saw the faintest impression of fingers on the glass, like someone had pressed from the inside recently. 5 fingers, then 4, then gone. He snapped a photo for documentation, but the image blurred at the edges. His phone glitched, froze entirely. The screen buzzed for a second, flashed an old photo of his son, and then went black. When he tried again, the window was clear. No prints, no blur, no sign of pressure on the other side. He sealed it anyway. Thick layers of concrete, leveled and smooth. It dried over the next 2 hours. He waited in silence, pacing the perimeter of the basement, staring at the walls when he wasn't looking at the floor. Packed his tools, signed the invoice. Keller didn't say a word as she handed him the check. But as he reached the front steps, he paused. The basement light had turned on. He hadn't touched the switch. He went back inside, asked Keller if someone else had gone down. She looked at him, confused. "No one goes down there," she said. "That's why I hired you." They both stood in silence as the light flickered once, then dimmed, then stayed on. Keller didn't ask any more questions. She simply locked the door and moved a heavy dresser in front of it, like it was routine, like she'd done it before. Rafferty drove away 10 minutes later, called his wife, told her he was on his way home, that the job had gone fine, that he'd be back by dark. Said it like he believed it. But the voicemail didn't match. The recording on her end played something else. It was him, but he wasn't speaking to her. The voice was lower, quieter, intimate in the wrong way. He was whispering to someone else, a voice too low to catch. A breathy murmur, a hum. Just one sentence stood out, spoken like a promise, spoken like a secret. It saw me, and it remembers. By the time I reached the cellar again, the wind had stopped altogether. No rustling trees, no chirping insects, not even the distant groan of the old weather vane. The world outside felt like it had exhaled and forgotten how to inhale again. I stepped through what was left of the doorframe, the broken wood crunching underfoot. My flashlight flickered in my shaking hand, weak and fading. The power was still out. My phone showed no signal. There were no neighbors nearby, no cars, no noise, just silence. And that window. Except now, there wasn't one. The cellar was colder than I remembered, and it smelled worse. Not just the usual rot and mildew. This was sweeter, sickening, like caramel burnt to tar and left to spoil. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, damp wood threatening to splinter. I descended slowly, every step a question I didn't want answered. When I reached the dirt floor, I looked toward the back wall. The window was gone. Where there had been a jagged hole, there was now brick. Solid, neat, clean, even. Bricks I didn't own. Mortar that hadn't been there yesterday. It looked like it had always been that way. Like the wall had never been broken. I stared for a long time, trying to process it. Trying to remember if maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Then I saw the mirror. I hadn't noticed it before. It stood in the far corner, behind a pile of warped wood and old paint cans. It was full length, narrow, almost like something you'd find backstage at a theater. The glass was flawless, not a speck of dust. But the frame was charred, misshapen like it had been exposed to fire. It should have been out of place, but it wasn't. It felt like it belonged, like it had been waiting. And then I looked at the reflection. It didn't match the room. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But when I moved, my reflection didn't. It stood there, smiling faintly. My face, yes, but not quite. Slightly off. The eyes were too large, the cheekbones too defined. A version of me rendered from memory, like someone trying to draw me without a reference. I lifted a hand. The reflection didn't move. Then it raised its own hand. I staggered back, nearly dropped the flashlight. The air grew heavy, cold enough that my breath came out in clouds. The beam of light dimmed to a sputter. I stepped forward against every instinct. Something about the mirror pulled. The glass began to ripple. Not crack, ripple like the surface of a pond. The figure inside stepped closer. No noise, no shattering. Just smooth, silent emergence. One leg, one arm. The head ducked through like slipping into a coat. It was me. Same clothes, same boots. Even the faint scar under my chin from when I was 8. But its eyes weren't mine. They were black, liquid, reflective. I ran. I didn't stop to think. Just turned and sprinted up the stairs, into the dark hallway, through the front door that no longer resisted, out into the cold night and across the field, overgrown grass slapping at my legs. I didn't check to see if it followed. I didn't dare. I just kept going until the trees swallowed the house behind me. I only stopped when my legs gave out. Somewhere near dawn, I found a road. A car passed eventually. I waved it down, told the driver I was lost. He didn't ask questions. That was 22 days ago. I haven't gone back. But last night, someone slid a note under my apartment door. No envelope, no stamp, just a sheet of paper folded once. Inside, a single sentence. The mirror is shut, but the reflection stayed. We live here now. Beneath that, a signature. It was my name, written in my handwriting. Only, I know I didn't write it.